Hi, I'm Emily with Threaded Journey, and today we are going to be doing an adaptation of a pattern that I have loved making, and it is the Rossi and Fredy Wrap Dress from the bold one. But today I'm going to be using these two pillowcases, making a shorter version. I'm going to be using the facing pieces as the main garment piece instead of doing all of the princess seams. I'm going to be doing sleeves that are less puff, and I'm also going to be making the V-neck version, but making it a little bit higher and just using facing instead of it being fully lined. Your two pillowcases will not be enough fabric to do the waist strap. The facing could be enough to do the facing, maybe, if you fold it just quite right. But for your waist strap and your pockets, for sure, you're going to need either a third pillowcase or you're going to need a coordinating fabric of some kind. I used the bottom of a white sheet, but you will need a little bit of extra fabric. And I'm assuming that you have made this pattern before because you're reusing it and remodifying it. So as we go through, I'm going to assume that you have used this pattern before. My first change is I'm going to fold over the seam allowance. That way I can cut these pieces on the fold. So I'm going to mark this as a fold line. Then I'm going to lengthen it. I made a 4-inch rectangle. Since this is going to be a fold line, I put it at a straight line right here and just overlapped that seam allowance there. So my additional part is 3 3/4 of an inch. Now over here, I'm going to scooch this so that this is on a straight line and come down and cut that. So I've now lengthened my piece 3 3/4 inches, and I did that on the front. And these are no longer going to be facing pieces. These are going to be main pieces. This one has already been cut. I'm going to actually lengthen it just a little bit. My back piece looks good. I've just lowered that rectangle just a little bit because I'm going to raise the neck. I did a practice cut of this and tried it on, and this is way too low for me. This would be the original stitch line here. I'm going to raise it up pretty much 3 inches. So I'm just doing it to the bottom of the low square neckline is basically what I decided I was going to do. Fill in a new piece right there. I want my triangle to still end in the same spot right up here. Stitch line will be here. And then my cut line, it's about 1 centimeter-ish there. So here is my new front neckline piece. Let's talk sleeve changes. This is the original pattern piece for the size 10 short puff sleeve. As you'll see here, I did the original pattern just exactly like it said, using the band, and the sleeve is poofy. So that puff is a lot. So for this, because I'm using pillowcases anyway and I have a limited amount of fabric, I wanted to narrow down that sleeve quite a bit. So I did some practicing. On my first one, I took off 2 inches but left the height, and as you can see, it is a tall sleeve, but it is a little bit less, not a lot less. I mean, technically I took off 4 inches, so it is a lot less. For the other side, I cut off even more off of this so it wasn't gathered near as much, but I also changed the height. And that made it where it sits a little bit flatter with my shoulder instead of poofing up. You can decide what you want to do, but it is possible to change that. The first one I took off 2 inches and left the rest of the pattern as it was. Then it was just still a little bit too tall. I didn't like it. So I took off an additional 2 inches. But I also removed about 1 inch right there for the height and kind of curved it right there. I'm going to take off about 4 inches from my pattern piece because it's a fold line. I want to keep that it's a straight line. I am going to remove 1 inch from my curve. This is now my cut line. This is my new stitching line. And when I actually cut the fabric, I may change that a little bit. Just depends what it looks like when it's cut and folded out, because that'll make a difference. I am going to do the band, so I need to remove this when I'm cutting it out. And see, it's still plenty big. As long as you don't go less than your band, you'll still have a little bit of a puff. But don't. I want to use the original end of the pillowcase as my hem. So I'm going to mark 19 inches on each side from that hem. This is my cutout space that I have for all of my bodice and sleeve pieces. This is going to be my main piece, my back piece here. I'm going to put it right down here. My sleeve, make sure you have the fold lines on your fold line, and my band. If you wanted to do the elastic, you would need even less space. That's going to be a straight line. That's going to be a straight line. So I can put those up next to each other. I still have 5 inches to work with. So I'm going to take that 5 inches. That should give me pretty much the same on both sides. I'm just going to double check that because these two, I need 2 of exactly the same. And I'm just going to trade out my bodice front piece here and just make sure that that fits all great. So I'm going to cut this one out of this pillowcase, and then I've got my second pillowcase to cut my other side. And that'll give me plenty of room to work with for my skirt. Now we need facing pieces because we're going to have to turn this. You need some scrap paper. Now, I just need to come down about 1 inch. The same exact thing here. Facing pieces are cut out, and this will be my fold line right here, and this will be the fold line right there. I have my facing pieces here, and I'm just going to cut those out. If you want to use the wing, you can attach this piece and then cut around it instead of having to sew it on, but I'm not going to use the wing this time. And I'm actually making my wrap piece smaller. I have folded it up inside 1.5 inches to make it a less wide wrap. Everything is cut out except for the skirt. And because I kind of need to work my way from the bottom up instead of hemming it to whatever I need, I'm going to wait to cut out my skirt pieces. I took my facing pieces and stitched them together at the shoulder seams. And I also just serged all the way around, but you could hem it. Up to you as to how you want to finish those edges. I've sewn my shoulder seams together on my bodice pieces. Now I'm going to take my facing piece and I'm going to line them up at the shoulder seams and clip them together. All right, I've lined up my shoulder seams, my V right here, lined up the back, those edges. I kind of made some marks to help me as I'm stitching, know where to stitch to and to turn. I did a little pressing here to make it easier to clip I'm just going to clip each of the corners and the V, making sure I don't clip into my stitches. Then I'm going to turn my lining in, press it, and I'll top stitch it. My shoulder seam's in, my neck is in, but now I've got one of my skirt panels here and I'm just going to play with it. Now remember, it's going to have to overlap. I'm going to take off 1 inch. I have 4 panels of this, so I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. I created 2 pieces of fabric for my skirt by cutting 2 of the panels in half and then stitching them on to one of the solid panels. I have my fabric I created folded in half, and then I'm just creating an A-line. I just put it here on the 5 and went to the 6. And that's just going to give me like a 1-inch little A, not an exaggerated A. I mean, you could have come over big time. So that's up to you. The only thing is that your top is going to be as wide as this right here. To gather it any amount, you need some fabric over here. So it just kind of depends on how much you want to gather. If you even want to gather, you wouldn't have to. You just need to make sure you can sit in it. So make sure you measure for your hips. So now I'm just going to cut that. Since they are the same, there's no real reason to mark a front or a back. And we're going to start out by putting gathering stitches in the top of each of them. Cuff is stitched on. And I'm going to go ahead and put my sleeve in. That's a little bit different than the pattern instructions, but I just think it's easier to do it now instead of putting it in the round. That's just me. Whatever. Sleeves are in. A little hint as you're gathering the front, make sure that your seamed part is the same width. Should be even. Do the pin in the middle. So pretty close anyway. And that way they don't get off and wonky. Skirt is in. Pressed, serged. Now we're going to come back to the sleeves here and we're going to line these up and stitch just about 2 or 3 inches down the arm and stop right there. I have the side seam just safety pinned in. I have found this very helpful when it's time to do the waist wrap, just because I want to make sure that it's in a good place. So for this one, I just kind of made more of a tie, not the true waist wrap, because I made it less wide and I did not wing it. I continued to play with my waist strap until I was happy, and ultimately I ended up stitching it in the bottom of the wrap right at the waistline, and my pocket was 1 inch below the waistline. So it's up to you as to where you put yours in. The safety pin trick works really well and allows you to play with it. I am so pleased with how this dress turned out. The less poofy sleeve, the higher neckline, using the lining as a bodice piece. Turned out so cute. I'm finished. I went ahead and just tied this one to the back. These are all the changes that I made. The higher V, less poofy sleeves, narrower waistband, no wing, and I did make bigger pockets too. Great reuse of this popular pattern. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss more pattern remakes.